Thank you for joining me here today. I'm Ashley Murphy, founder and principal of Arete Wealth Strategists Australia. Today's presentation is to do with issues affecting the children of the globally mobile. So let's get into the presentation. First of all, I should mention that all of our presentations are recorded and available on our YouTube channel. Please feel free to go over there. You'll see a whole host of topics that I've covered over the past 5 years. It would greatly help the channel if you would like or subscribe to that if it's of interest to you. But certainly feel free to like that and leave a comment. It's worth mentioning today does not represent personal, tax, financial, or investment advice. You'd be highly encouraged to seek your own tax counsel or financial planner, as the case may be. A little bit about me and my background. So I'm a tri-citizen born in the UK, raised in Brisbane, Australia, and an American citizen as well, born to an American mother. Let me see. I moved to the US in 2005, coming from a background in corporate finance, which meant that I'm very heavy in budgets and forecasts, given what that kind of work involved. I'm also a regular conference speaker. We have a conference of our own coming up in January next year for the Global Financial Planning Institute, as well as with the Investments and Wealth Institute in February in Arizona. So I'm understood to be one of the leading experts in this particular area. Kinds of clients we work with at Arete Wealth Strategists are listed here. So here's an example of an Aussie business owner looking to sell her business, move back to Australia, and what we were able to accomplish for her. A high net worth family, Aussie family living in the US, what we're able to accomplish for them. They actually ended up moving to New Zealand, and we saved them millions of dollars in capital gains tax in the process. And an Australian executive and their family having permanently relocated to the US, wrapping up their ties in Australia. Okay. So we're not going to have the typical, here's the agenda for today, because I think a more impactful way of delivering that is to talk about the different types of clients, the different types of expats, and the challenges that they face when they think about the kind of legacy and they'd like to leave for their children, but also the kind of upbringing they'd like to provide for their children. This is all going to vary tremendously depending on the age of your kids and the financial stage that you're at as well. So it's a pretty broad brush strokes that I'll be taking here. But broadly speaking, it's identified that there are 3 types of expats. You've got your temporary movers who are in country for, I'd say, up to 6 years. It's not written in stone exactly how long, but typically 6 years. People haven't really developed the net worth in a foreign country to spend significant time and effort trying to get their quote-unquote global affairs organized, because the affairs aren't that deep or detailed in that foreign country, typically by that period of time. You've got the domicile uncertain. This would be the group that move overseas seeking adventure, seeking a promotion. They don't really know when they're coming back. They don't even know if they're coming back. They may be waiting for that promotion, meet Mr. and Mrs. Right, whatever the situation may be. Lastly, we have the permanent movers. These are the folks that typically know they're on a good wicket. They've moved countries and they love it for whatever reason, and they've decided to stay. Often it's a case where the kids really are there through their late teenage years, are very close to their friends in turn, and so end up going to a domestic university. And one thing leads to another. The kids stay in country, therefore the parents stay in country, and they become permanent movers. But overall, what I see when I look back on the decade of experience that I have working with globally mobile families is we're mostly looking to raise well-rounded kids that and provide a household that's stable, with a stable and stability, meaning in the household itself. And you'll see what I mean by that. I mean the parents actually being around, and if they're not around, then making a plan for that. Stable or rising living standards, provide for higher education, travel and experiences, ideally some work experience thrown in there. And then for adult children of the globally mobile, we may want to make tax efficient gifts to the children and pass on one's estate in a tax efficient and administratively convenient manner, and not get tied up in years of probate and so forth. Okay, so let's unpack that. The way to talk about today's presentation is to go through each one of these goals and see where, let's put some brackets around the particular keywords and what the financial planning implications of the goal is. So I point to a stable household. To me, that means estate planning, stable or rising living standard. Well, gosh, if one's not around, heavens forbid, due to premature death or disability, then we want to make sure that there's the financial resources in place, as well as the documents in place to make sure that things unfold according to your wishes, that the appropriate people are empowered to make decisions for you, and your wishes are actually known and respected. So that's what we'll be talking about in a little more detail in a moment. Higher education, pretty straightforward, college planning. Travel, work experience, travel and experiences and work experience. That really comes down to immigration planning. And that I've seen some unfortunate instances where individuals were not aware of these cutoffs and have faced tremendous difficulties and disruption to their plans as a result of a lack of immigration planning. And then for adult children, we would say that a lot of life has already been lived. Now we're focusing more on legacy planning and thinking about tax efficient gifting, as well as estate planning to make sure that things happen as you wish. So gift tax planning there, and then estate planning there. So that's today's presentation. There'll be about 5 different modules that I'll go into in some detail. And I welcome questions throughout. I think that makes for a much more engaging and lively presentation. So feel free to stick up your hand or type in your comment, and I'm going to try and do something that comes very unnatural and talk and think and read comments as it all comes in. Okay, so estate planning for the globally mobile with dependent children. Let's see what we have here. We are advocates of a trust-centered approach to estate planning. And what does that mean? That really boils down to 4 different documents that we want to see. We want to see the revocable living trust. That would be a type of trust that allows for the grantor, the individual granting the property into the trust, to specify their wishes and how they intend for things to unfold. Next would be the will, the last will. Very important to say last will to avoid challenges that there isn't a prior will that that supersedes the will. Hence, that's why it always is entitled last will and testament. So this is really providing instructions to your trustee, to your executor, as to how to deal with the specific affairs. If structured correctly, we'll see a pour over will, which pours assets not specifically titled to your trust back into your trust. General powers of attorney. This is going to empower someone if you are deemed to be quote unquote incompetent, i.e. unconscious or unable to attend to your affairs. This empowers someone to be able to take specific actions for you with regards to your financial life. And lastly would be healthcare directives. This is to do with the standard of care that you seek given your medical situation. Do you want to continue with resuscitation or turn things off and call it quits? Okay, so looking here a little bit more at the revocable living trust, the main thing we want to be aware of for globally mobile parents is to see guardianship provisions there for minor children. So in a client instance I'm thinking of, I had a doctor in New York. She was doing very well financially. Her husband happened to be in an accident, was severely injured, and it got me thinking, well, what if they had both been in that accident? What would have happened to their 2 young children without guardianship provisions in their revocable living trust that would say who the guardians would actually be? Because courts, as you could well imagine, get extremely nervous giving custody to a foreign individual. And so there are nightmare stories that estate planners will share to do with kids being trapped in limbo being unable to get to the actual carers that the incapacitated would like to be the carers. I have another point here about beware trustees and or beneficiaries who are located in a foreign country. I should say, this is written from the perspective of the US. So I've said located outside of the US. If you have such an instance there, you have the possibility of a trust being deemed a foreign trust with foreign tax implications. Things could get nasty and ugly pretty quickly. So what you want to do is work with an estate planner who ideally is educated in these areas. Typically, they're going to be STEP members, STEP, Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners, which is a British organization that takes a very global view of estate planning. They would be someone who would probably work in concert with an estate planner in the other country and put together some estate documents that are going to do what you wish. Next, the will. Ideally, if you're implementing a trust-centered plan as described here, you may coordinate your Australian will to be a pour-over will, which suggests that any assets not specifically titled to the trust will pour over into that will and therefore be treated in the way that has been specified in that will. It's worth mentioning, just going back a step to the revocable trust, the best example I've ever heard, and feel free to use this, of course, as to what a trust is, was from one of my best friends who's a business attorney. And he describes a trust as essentially being like a FedEx box. And you've got a FedEx box with property in it. So the trust has specific property. It has who's the sender and who's the receiver. So essentially a FedEx box. The thing is, if you don't actually put anything in the FedEx box and you paid for priority shipping of this box, then what good is it if the recipient receives it and there's nothing in the box? So I always say a trust is not worth buying. It's not worth the service fee if you don't actually title things to it. So very important to put certain assets that otherwise don't pass by way of contract, such as real estate is always a great one. Be sure the real estate is in the trust. Otherwise, what was the point of the trust in the first place if no property is actually titled to it? Okay, so making sure that we have a coordinated estate plan where assets pour into the wills and then are distributed to the appropriate beneficiaries. Best practice is to obtain separate wills. It happens a couple of years ago, I think it was 2014. The US became a signatory to this UN Convention on International Wills. So that is a thing, but a big no-no with international wills is that probate has to be passed sequentially. So what does that mean? Well, it means you've got to wait a couple of years for that probate to be granted in the first country, then the second country, before the estate can be settled. What a nightmare. You wouldn't want to do that and don't recommend it. So what I'm proposing here is certainly higher cost, higher upfront cost, but I would put it to you, if your beneficiaries could name a dollar amount that headache and hassle is worth of waiting years for an estate to be settled, as compared with the administrative convenience of every asset being titled appropriately, going to the intended beneficiary in a tax efficient manner, then it would more than pay. The professional cost of getting this done would more than cover that. The other thing to keep in mind, by the way, is probate fees that can be charged in certain countries, in certain states within the US, where in California, that fee, I believe, is up to 6% of the first $100,000, declines from there. But that in itself, if you're looking at perhaps $10,000 US to get all of this set up, including in the foreign country, then I think you could make a strong case that it's actually financially beneficial as well. Oh, a chat just came in, and I'm going to just leave that there and read Debbie's question. Can the guardianship be an addendum to a living trust? I have a trust, but nothing for immediate action for our children. That's a fine question. And Debbie, I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to punt that one because I am not an estate attorney and could not be as specific as that. I would like to think so. I mean, really, do you need a whole new do you need a whole new trust just to specify that? I would be inclined to say no, but please, please, please seek out appropriate counsel. So looking here, general powers of attorney, this is really, it's implicit in the phrase there, power of attorney. You are empowering someone to make decisions on your behalf. So choose wisely with that individual, because they would be responsible for your affairs in the event of your incapacity prior to your passing. And lastly, healthcare, because it's your executor that's otherwise taking care of things if you do pass. Healthcare directives outlines your wishes regarding healthcare to physicians and other healthcare workers. So as I mentioned before, that's the case of how you'd like to be treated. Do you need a power of attorney in each country? Good question, Desi. In each country, I believe the answer is yes on that question. Let me see. Yes, I'm going to, yet again, I'm going to say I'm not an estate attorney. This is something that needs to be handled by the appropriate professional, but the logic that I'm using to think here is that the provisions, the laws, the formatting of that document is going to be specific to each country. So I would be inclined to say yes to that. However, maybe there's some money to be saved in not bothering with the US power of attorney if one has simplified their financial life in a foreign country and you've set up everything to pass by way of contract or trust, in which case there may be nothing to do. However, if your situation wasn't like that, then I could see in the event of your incapacity, you would want someone who's able to handle your affairs. Okay, moving on. Risk management, life and disability insurance. What do we have here? I've been a big advocate of US life insurance. Where you've got the choice between Australian life insurance and US life insurance, I always think US life insurance is the way to go. I should mention, I love saying this, by the way, we're fee only. We don't receive any commissions from anyone for anything, period. I say this simply because the dollars and cents speak volumes when you look at it. And here's the thing. Cost of US life insurance, I'm thinking of term insurance, not permanent insurance like whole life insurance or universal life insurance, is way cheaper per $1,000 in the US, as ceteris paribus, assuming all else is equal. So same health rating of one individual who's quoted in the US versus Australia. US is going to be way cheaper. The death benefit comes out tax-free, not so in Australia. A non-tax dependent is going to get hit with a 15% tax. So I think those are some pretty compelling reasons to obtain, if one has the choice and flexibility, get your life insurance in the US. How much do you need? I used to teach this at UC Berkeley Extension, and this was the acronym used, MediRef. And I think Money Smart here, the government department in Australia, have done a decent job in creating this life insurance needs calculator. So you would simply go through and answer these couple of questions, and it's going to essentially apply a MediRef needs analysis for you. MediRef stands for, just to come back here for a second, stands for mortgage, education, i.e. college funding, debt, other debts. You've got income and retirement, so replacing whatever living expenses you need over the course of your survivors, the period of time you want to fund for. E for emergency or estate, if you're in a higher net worth bracket, and then F is for final expenses, which is a nice way of saying funeral expenses, and that's essentially what we see here. So here's the funeral, pay off the mortgage, clear all the other debts, pay for kids' college. Not that anyone in Australia ever does that. That's more of an American thing. Help with my family's okay. We tick all those things. How much do we need for your funeral? Well, little do people know the funeral industry was one of the first industries taken over by private equity. So they are there's massive concentration, and there's an extortion scheme going on with the funeral business, in my opinion, with what they charge for funeral. What's your home valued at today? So no one's home's worth that. Let's throw another zero on that. What's the mortgage? Let's say someone's got 500,000 owing. Do you expect your family to keep? They're going to keep. Next. What's this? Other debts. Let's say we owe 100,000 to someone else. They're the kids. What's their cost? It's 25,000. We don't know whether if they're going to Harvard or Stanford, it's going to be more than double that. But if it's Cal State East Bay, it could be a lot less. Let's say, what's this? Every month, it costs 10,000 a month to keep everyone in a home instead. Oh dear, how much these other assets? So let's say there's 250,000. I'm just throwing in some random numbers here. Other investments, let's say there's another 500,000. Other assets of that, and it's going to spit out a need. There you go. Estimated life insurance, you need exactly that much. But I think that's take it with a grain of salt, because it depends on the amount of time that you want to provide. And that's the bullet point that I've got here. How long are you hoping to keep everyone comfortable for? Is it until the youngest is out of the house, or until your surviving spouse has finished up as well? Okay, moving back along. So, the planning tip I wanted to make here is just make sure that the trust, your revocable living trust that we spoke about earlier, is a contingent beneficiary. Typically, your surviving spouse would be the primary beneficiary, but if neither of you are around, it goes to the trust, which provides the funding to fulfill on those guardianship provisions and to make sure that the death benefit is being administered for the kid's benefit and not being taken by someone else. Disability insurance. Now, this is one of those things. It's not as portable internationally, unfortunately. So I've been working hard with disability carriers for years now on this, but unfortunately, COVID changed their agendas and they had other problems to deal with. Here's the thing, is that if you go on claim and you have a disability policy from a foreign country, you're going to need to return to that country to continue that claim beyond a 6-month period. And few individuals have sufficient disability coverage where taking an international trip every 6 months is going to be part of the plan. So what's the goal here? You want to seek flexibility. And by the way, if someone did have equal choice in where they were going to get a policy, which obviously there's a lot of things to consider here with that, but the US has a much better disability insurance situation given recent changes in the past 12 months with what's happened in Australia. So you've got stronger definitions of what it means to be disabled. The benefit amounts can be significant, up to 25,000 a month is what I've seen. You can get as little as a 30-day wait and then have your benefit indexed for inflation. And then there's all manner of riders, optional extras, if you will. So compassionate care, what's that? That's if a loved one is disabled and needs care, then you can actually receive benefit from your own policy for providing that care because your income has been impacted. Catastrophic, that's where it pays some multiple of the benefit if it's a total and permanent disability, automatic increase in the benefit with every passing year, and retirement contributions. People often forget about that. This is a very difficult concept to present to people, but it's self-evident. It's self-evident insofar as for someone really under the age of probably 45, I'd say, depending on their career and what they're doing and how long they intend on working for, but someone under the age of 40, 45, still their most valuable asset is their future earned income. And if that asset is uninsured, then it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you insure such assets as your house and your car, which are less likely to be impaired and worth less, then it really doesn't make sense, and that's something you want to take care of. Next, education and college planning. Okay, lots and lots of words. Please stay with me. This is, I hope everyone's had their coffee to get through this one. So while paying for your kids' college is a distinctly American goal, the notion of planning for your kids' college is pretty universal. It's important to note over the last 3 to 4 decades, the cost of education in the US has risen at a multiple of that of inflation. And I think that's well known. No one pushes back on that and says that's not true. As I mentioned earlier, if you want to send your kids to an Ivy League school, you're talking about $70,000, north of $70,000 per year, US dollars, and continuing to inflate at 4 to 5% per year. So it begs the question, I always like to have people step out of their comfort zone and consider other possibilities. It begs the question, is it possible for a child, given that this presentation is pitched at the globally mobile, for the child to perhaps resume residency in their other country of citizenship? And if so, what would that look like? I've seen this a number of times with clients who have sent kids back to Australia to do university, where they are treated as Australian residents, where the cost of that education is a fraction of what it is in the US. And it's a fraction at the present time where we've got an exchange rate that's presently at 64 cents to the US dollar, or other way around, it's 64 cents to the Australian dollar. So quite possibly, yes, it does make sense. And is it also just going that next step? Is it possible that that child might be eligible for a program run by what's now known as Services Australia, formerly Centrelink, as youth allowance? I'm speaking with a client later today, as a matter of fact, where that's exactly what they're looking into, is having their girl take a gap year, work full-time, earn above a certain threshold, resume Australian residency, get treated at the independent rate, and essentially have an allowance to help her get through college. So significantly less expensive, more financially efficient than the alternative doing that in the US. Of course, you have to visit your kid in Australia, but things could be worse, right? So college savings accounts. Here's the thing. If you're staying in the US and sending your kid abroad, then I think they still make sense if there's a sufficient time horizon. I was just speaking with a prospective client earlier today, and their kids are actually already in college. And I said, you know what, unless there's a state tax benefit in his state of residence, which is Maryland in the US, then I wouldn't bother contributing to a 529. If you had younger kids and you had years and years for that compounding effect to take hold, then this really could make a lot of sense. If the kid is going in the US or internationally, there is a list published. It's rather difficult to track down, but there's a list published of all of the universities that are actually recognized for 529 expenses, and where you may send your child to that college and you can use your 529 money, and it's deductible. It's all on the up and up. And the 529 funds may be used properly. Now that makes sense if the parent remains in the US, but what if you've got a globally mobile parent? That's when 529s don't work nearly as well. And here's why. Because 529s are written for the US tax code, just in the same way that Australian insurance bonds are written into the Australian tax code. When you've got someone who's a primary tax resident of a foreign country, these tax advantage accounts rarely work. It's the same rationale behind HSAs, health savings accounts, Roth IRAs, where they just don't work that well internationally. What is understood much better in tax treaties is your good old-fashioned taxable brokerage account. So when I have clients in this situation who are saving for their kids' college and they say, we don't know where we're going to be in 5 years, and I'd say that the best thing for you to do is simply set aside some money in a taxable brokerage account, because that's going to be treated pretty well, pretty consistently, pretty tax efficiently in whatever country that you're located in. Well, not whatever country in the world, but either Australia or the US, because capital gains are sourced to your country of residence. So you're in the US, you're either looking at a 15 or 20% federal capital gains bill, or in Australia for long-term capital gains rates, you're talking about an upper limit of 22.5%. And it's flexible too. Who knows if your kid's going to go to culinary school or become a ballerina or whatever. And then the last bullet point here is higher income net worth parents may have little interest in college savings and may just want to pay directly from it, in which case you would have been too clever by half contributing to that 529 account. Immigration status and work rights for children. This has come up recently with a newly onboarding client. And the issue that they ran into, which is very unfortunate, but like I said, they're only a new client. I would have made them aware of this had they started working with me earlier, was that the wife is an Australian citizen, and she presumed that her daughter in the US would be able to get Australian citizenship too. The daughter has turned 18, and they were making plans to send her off to college in Sydney, until they discovered that, in fact, that application had to be received a couple of years beforehand. So we'll get to that in a moment. What we're looking at on this slide is to say, if you are a US citizen or permanent resident abroad, not that you can be a permanent resident abroad for all that long, but if you were, then here are the restrictions. You've got until age 21 of that child to apply for citizenship on their behalf. Otherwise, they're doing it themselves, and that could be a whole lot more complicated and uncertain for them. The permanent resident, the child may piggyback onto that permanent resident application, as you see here. Different types of visas in the US. So these are the most common types that I've seen with my client base. So L1 for senior managers, E3s for Aussies, apparently maybe Irish too, they're jumping on that one. H1Bs and O1s. So few of them, with the exception of the L1, provide work rights for the kids. That, to me and to many parents, it's not a huge thing, but it is a thing. If you want your kid in high school to work at McDonald's or Starbucks or wherever and get some experience in the real world, they can't if that's your visa type. Australia, let's go to the next slide. Australia, well, the slide after this, Australia is a bit more flexible. But here's what we need to realize is that if that application is not in prior to age 16, then that child is applying as an adult, and that, again, could be a lot more uncertain and difficult for them to obtain that. So the strategy we're talking about really needs to be done years ahead. The difference between Australia and the US is that kids born in Australia are not automatically citizens. They inherit this same legal status as their parents, until they've been there for 10 years, and then they're considered ordinarily resident, in which case they would get citizenship. Australia is a bit more generous with this, as you heard me say. So most of these visas do grant work rights. Even a 407 training visa will grant rights to work up to 40 hours per fortnight, which for a dependent child, you probably wouldn't want to work in more than 40 hours a fortnight anyway. So it's a little bit easier on the Australian side. Now, tax planning for gifts. What do we have here? Really two things to know. $16,000 per year to any individual, so to any child, and that's either spouse too. So husband may give 16 to child one, wife may give 16 to child one as well. So you could double up and hit 32 if you wanted. Amounts above that are going to eat into your unified gift credit. Each individual presently in 2022 has a lifetime unified, which is the word for gift and estate, tax credit of 12.06 million. So if you happen to have that sort of money, you are able to either have an estate worth that and not pay any estate tax, or give that away through your life, but that's going to reduce that credit amount that you have and not pay any gift or estate tax on that. It's set to revert back in 2025 to around 6 million. However, there's likely to be portability between spouses, so the unused amount can be inherited by the surviving spouse. Giftor of the gift would need to file a Form 709 to report that gift and have that deducted from their unified gift credit. And the gift recipient, assuming they're receiving it from a foreign giftor, would need to file a Form 3520. Where would you go if you wanted to learn more about what it is that we do? Well, nowhere better than Arete, ARETE-WS.com. and you would click on that Get Started page right there. You can also download the key financial data sheet that we're just in the process of updating right now, or come to the Knowledge Center. We've got a whole bunch of posts and webinars and flowcharts and white papers and you name it, it's coming. In fact, we're just commissioning a new white paper on Americans retiring to Australia, and that's looking at being 16,000 words. So very, very detailed, probably the best resource out there on that topic. I am at your disposal to answer any questions that you have. So I'll sit here. You're going to be shocked at how comfortable I can be with seemingly uncomfortable silences. Kathleen raised her hand, but I think it just suddenly went back down again. Any other questions here? Will the presentation be made available? That's always asked by people that are late to join or don't read any of the invitation we send out, because every single time without fail, we make these presentations available on our website. So yes, it will be made available. Folks that registered, not everyone that registered attends. So if you registered, then you'll be notified when that's available, typically 1 to 2 days before we get that up. Okay, questions come in. From Gerald, good to see you again. Gerald, any issues when having an Australian citizen resident structure their trust to be tax effective when the inheritor is US based? Let me read that again. Any issues when having an Australian citizen resident structure their trust to be tax effective when the inheritor is US based? I might need to unmute you there, Gerald, because can you talk and describe that in a little more detail, please?
Sure. Well, my mother is based in Australia. She's in her late 80s, and we're not expecting her to live too much longer. And is there ways she can structure her trust?
Yeah.
Me and my sister will get it 50-50. Are there things we can do there? For example, she has a personal super fund.
Yeah. No, that was actually what we dealt with in Q3. I think you would have seen those. So we went into detail on that over 3 separate webinars. My answer would be to minimize what is deemed to be taxable Australian property, to probably, if you think about the sequencing of how she is spending her money, I don't think super is an especially tax efficient asset for the inheritor, because you're going to get hit with a 15% tax on the distributions from that. So that's not great. Real estate, her primary residence is a pretty tax efficient asset, but any other investment property is not. The key thing would be to have her executor or in her will, it's up to her how she wants to do it, but have the estate itself sell those assets, because you're located in the US, you're going to get hammered with capital gains tax if the asset passes to you in kind, as opposed to you merely inheriting the cash that was settled by an Australian tax resident. So that's a very easy tip to provide. But again, I would encourage you to go talk to an Australian estate planner and a US estate planner for both situations, for your situation and also for your mother. You're welcome. Okay. No other questions. I think there's been plenty of time. If folks did have other questions, they would have had an opportunity by now to get them in. However, when I say that we're just about to wrap up, suddenly people tend to if they've been sitting on a question, it tends to prompt them to ask it. Seeing as none have come through, I want to thank you for your time here today. We'll be back next month, and actually next month's topic is to do with buying Australian real estate from abroad, good idea or not. And we're going to be having Dr. Andrew Unterweger, a specialist in exactly that service, a guy who lives in Singapore. He's actually also one of the few financial planners who's an MD. So he's a medical doctor, and and he's transitioned over to sorry, I'm just reading Karen. He's transitioned over to be a financial planner. Sorry, Ashley, there are a couple questions over in the chat. Thank you so much. You know, I was looking there. We sent out emails. We always send out emails. I'm sorry, Kathleen. Looked like there was there. Hey, let me run my question. I have 3 kids who are interested in university in the US. They're all citizens. Is there any way to reduce the cost of uni in the US? There is, actually. Well, there is and there isn't. Here's the short answer to that, and that is, Kathleen, if you wanted to get a fantastic deal on a vacation, if we said this coming summer, you don't care where you go, you just want to go on a vacation, the likelihood that you're going to get a great deal is much better compared with if you said, I want to go to the Gold Coast between December 25th and the 2nd of January, and I probably want to stay in Burleigh Heads. If you said that, chances of getting a fantastic deal are drastically diminished. So I'm trying to abbreviate what is otherwise turned into an entire lecture about what's called late stage college planning. But keep in mind that different universities have different demographic attributes and different even personality attributes that they're looking for in the kinds of students that they want to bring in. If your heart is fixed on a certain university, then that is a problem, as opposed to shopping out your profile or your child's profile to a bunch of different universities. What's called the EFC, the expected family contribution of that family, can vary dramatically from one university to the next, even in the same tier of universities. So that would be my shorthand end of the webinar answer on that. Otherwise, I would say consider going elsewhere. But as you mentioned, that's your children's preference. Sarah asked the same question. So yes, the slides the recording will be up. I think that's it, Kathleen. I hope that was helpful. There's a great book on this topic, by the way, and that's oh gosh, it's late stage college planning. Let me just quickly go there. We'll go to Amazon and I'll see if I can locate that for you. Where is it? No. I think it's coming up because I'm in Australia, unfortunately, or it thinks I'm in Australia, and college planning is a different thing here. Kathleen and Sarah, I'll email that recommendation to you, so you'll get that shortly. Thank you, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you next month. Have a good rest of your day.